lounging, son.
All right. Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and with me I got my boy Mario.
What's up?
And today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite runs in comic books, Captain America by the great Ed Brubaker.
You picked the perfect time for this too, because so this is actually signed by Ed Brubaker right there.
Oh, wow.
I didn't get a CGC.
Why didn't you get it graded, bro?
Actually,
how are you supposed to fucking... I
I
want to know,
probably-
is your hat a fucking 9.0 or 9.8?
I probably could have. This is one of 18 that exist. This was very limited
So first appearance of Ed Brubaker on a hat.
on AVX.
Yeah,
AVX
it's
hat.
graded.
Yeah.
The value's dropping as we speak.
Oh, I know. Every time I wear it, just
And you're also wearing the fucking the Captain America shirt.
This one is
This wasn't
Commander.
even planned.
This isn't planned. I just love Cap.
He loves Cap. I love Cap. I'm wearing Flash because I talked to Joshua Williamson today, so I was dressing for the occasion. He didn't know he was dressing for the occasion, but hey, here he is.
By accident.
And yeah, this era of Marvel, I talked about it a couple weeks ago on the podcast where we talked about Invincible Iron Man by Matt Fraction. At this time, I think, and even right before we started recording, we talked about how that was really another golden age at Marvel.
Yeah.
Everything was hitting at that point. Everything was really, really good. I think Thor was gone at the moment. Eventually, Straczynski came and took over the book.
Yeah.
Because it's
you're talking about when Captain America started? When Brubaker started with Captain America?
Yeah, Thor was not around.
Thor was dead.
Yeah, Thor died in at the end of Ragnarok.
Yeah.
From I think Michael Avenomi wrote that. That was a great fucking arc as well.
That's one of those I think forgotten stuff now.
Yeah, but at the time we had Daredevil by Bendis. Bendis was writing Avengers.
And then the Brubaker by Daredevil too. So the period of time we're talking about basically around 2003, 2004,
right,
to 2000. I mean, you can argue 2012, 2011. Hawkeye's Fraction's probably the last remnants of that time period.
I guess, yeah.
But the majority of it was between 2003 and 2008. It's probably the peak of all of this.
Yeah, just so many fucking good titles. I mean, but Brubaker's Cap was, in my opinion, really the pinnacle for me. I didn't okay, I don't want to say I didn't like Cap before. I read a few Cap runs, but it was never he was never one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Ed Brubaker made him one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
And he did the unthinkable. We'll just get this right out of the way. He did what nobody ever thought would happen. Nobody ever thought had the balls to do. He brought back fucking Bucky, dude. Cap's sidekick, who had been dead since the fucking 40s.
Yeah, so that's one of the interesting things about it is that it happened in real time. Because Bucky existed, obviously, Captain America 1941, and then it went away. So after the war, Captain America stopped being popular, and the book struggled to have sales, and then they tried to bring it back in the 50s. There was another smaller run in the 50s, and Bucky wasn't in anymore. He stopped existing after this. I think 1941, 1947, and then they tried it back in 1951 to 1955. And then the next time we see him was 1964 with Avengers #4.
Mm-hmm.
And Bucky wasn't in any of that.
Right.
So he literally stopped existing in the comic book form after 1947 or so. So it happened in real time, where he literally stopped existing in comic book form. As far there were flashbacks, stuff that we would see, but there wasn't anything in continuity with adult Bucky until Brubaker brought him back.
Yeah.
And that's also fictionally, that's also what happened. So it's really weird. There's nothing else that exists like this.
No, dude. I mean, he made that book, and I think it really helped with Steve Epting on art.
Yeah.
The tone of it, even the color palettes were very dark.
It's muted. It felt more in line. So this kind of goes in. So Daredevil by Bendis. Mm-hmm. I remember that being a big deal because it felt like if HBO made a Daredevil show, this feels like The Wire, but Daredevil. And Brubaker's exactly was the answer to that. Mm-hmm. Brubaker's Cap, where it was his own tone, and Brubaker writes differently, but it feels like in the same kind of world.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I know.
It's espionage. It's spy movies. It's serious. There's not really jokey. It's not. He's no longer oh, gee golly, I wonder if we should punch Hitler in the face. Mm-hmm. It stopped being that way. He felt more like a regular person. And all of that modernized Cap, because right before this, we had gotten Robert Kirkman.
Right, the Marvel Knights run. Yeah, I remember that. It's super fucking bright. I just looked through my collection. I was like, it literally had this, and then Ed Brubaker. Yeah. It's so completely opposite.
So different, and
it's crazy, dude.
And the thing is, it actually at first didn't go over well. A lot of people hated on it. The idea of bringing back back Bucky was one of the few characters you just do not touch. And but it ended up working out just fine. I mean, he's a mainstay now. He's in movies. He's all over the place.
Yeah, fucking Winter Soldier, dude.
Yeah.
I love I love the characters. That fucking mystery too of like him like finding out who the Winter Soldier was, and then you had Red Skull who was also like his consciousness was inside Lucan, right?
But he dies
Alexander
in the very beginning.
Yeah.
So we introduced to Winter Soldier by him assassinating Red Skull. He's holding the cosmic cube in a window. And he gets shot.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
And that's the first thing we see. And you're like, what the like? I don't know who the bad guy is. I don't know who the fuck this guy is. I don't know what's going on. And Cap's all depressed and sad. And everything's really serious. Like this is crazy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he gets crazy because it quickly. And the other thing too is it stops being a Steve Rogers book very quickly. Because by the time you get to the Civil War tie-in,
which is only like 20-something issues in.
Like issue 24, 25 or something.
25 is with the death of Cap on the cover with his hand on the newspaper. Yeah. But yeah, like if you think about like looking back now, like at the time it felt like, oh, this is like it's going for a while. But if you read it in the trade, you're like, that's literally like only 2.5 trades worth of Steve.
Yeah. And then it switches to perspective to Bucky.
Right.
And that's the other thing too, is that it's an interesting topic because he's dealing with Steve's dead. He got his memories back. Now he has to pick up the mantle. The whole thing is and he develops Bucky from scratch because he's basically not a character. Because we haven't seen him.
Yeah, and I think the choice too, the Winter Soldier is because Russia took his body, brainwashed him, and fucking would created code commands to control him and would send him out to assassinate. Which they pretty much insinuate that Bucky was the reason that like certain historical figures got killed. Yeah. I think he even insinuated
JFK.
Yeah, JFK was killed by Bucky.
Yeah.
Who the fuck could have thought of that? You know what I mean? Like it was such a fucking brilliant take on it, and like so like all these like he doesn't even know who the fuck he is. He doesn't remember Steve. He doesn't know anything.
It explains what he would be missing. Why nobody would know who he was. Why nobody knew Bucky was alive.
Yeah, and I also thought it was cool too because like. This plays out over a few years too, even going into the Winter Soldier, is that because he was in Russia, he has a connection to Black Widow.
He was a trainer in the Red Room project, and they have their whole thing too, which they're my favorite couple in superhero at all, Bucky and Natasha, and that gets its own book too. They kind of explain that she was going to get married to a general, and they had an affair, and that's one of the reasons why he got frozen too.
Okay.
Is that they got mad that he was banging Black Widow.
I didn't read that one.
And so that was Captain America. It was called Captain America and Bucky, with Brubaker and Francavilla. So.
Oh wait, I think it. Okay. You know what? I think I need to go back and read that now because I read it, but it's been so long that. Plus, you know, those are my dark days. So I think a little of my brain cells got burned out. But yeah, I'm gonna go back and read that.
So yeah, so they established that, and he's learning it. So it's it helps with us. He's remembering that he was with Natasha romantically while we're finding out about it, so it works to kind of slowly progress the story. Yeah. I think that, you know, like, if you really look back at Brubaker's run, too, you're you know, like you said, it's not so much about Steve. That book really is about Bucky. Yeah. And we see the growth of, like, when he does start to get his memories back, but, like, he has to deal with, like, the fact that he did... Yeah, he killed so much, right? And then, as we said, Cap dies. He takes up the fucking mantle. Even before that, it's a whole storyline of the fact that it's more about he doesn't want anybody else to have it, because you get the Civil War where they have the four phases, like the four phases of like death and like dealing with it. I forget what it's called.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
And each one of them had a different storyline. Each one of them was about like the different stages of death and the grief and acceptance and writing and all that shit. I forget what it's called. Fallen Sun?
Yeah. You're right, yeah.
In that one, it's when Hawkeye comes back from the dead. And the plan for Tony, because by this point he's running S.H.I.E.L.D., he wants to take the S.H.I.E.L.D. and he wants Clint to take over as being Captain America. And Bucky doesn't want it to happen. He doesn't want anybody to take over. He wants him to just leave him alone.
Right.
And there's also that wonderful issue of JMS Thor, where Thor comes back and he finds out Steve's dead, and then he looks for him in like wherever the fuck Death goes, where he's at, and he can't find him, and then he gets a vision of Steve, and then he gives the whole world one moment, like 15 seconds of silence
Mm-hmm.
in his honor. So that's fucking great.
I don't remember that one. Okay, I gotta go back and read that too now. Thanks.
It's all this, I read them all the time, so that's why I remember all this stuff.
Yeah. You're really fucking putting me to shame here, but it's all good.
But this goes to that end that we're talking about. Like all of this stuff was tied in so fucking well to this time period. And yeah, like Bucky was dealing with so many different things at the same time. He didn't want anybody to be it. Then finally he gets convinced to take over the mantle. Then he has to deal with that. Then he has to deal with Natasha's relationship with him.
Right.
Then Steve comes back. But then they out him. He gets fucking canceled before anybody else got canceled. Because it gets leaked to the press that he was actually Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And they're like, how is the heir to the shield
right
a fucking mass murderer?
Yeah, dude. The trial of Captain America is so good.
Dude. And then he gets convicted and sent off to fucking Russia to die in a fucking gulag.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And then Fear itself happens and it's all
I loved his costume design too, and he had the fucking gun.
Yeah. The
so
shiny
dope.
suit, but it's all black from the waist down, but the rest of it's all super shiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking dope.
Alex Ross designed that too, right? Yeah.
No, do I have that issue? Of course I do. I have it framed inside my Alex Ross? Of course I do.
Some Alex Ross?
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Yeah, I love this run. I like everything about it. It's very serious. It's very Ed Brubaker in that it's very focused on like spy and espionage kind of thing. But it also gets very comic booky. Some of its stuff, if you go back and read it, it is really dumb. There's a scene where Tony captures Bucky and brings him up to a helicarrier. So he disconnects his metal arm and it goes through the ventilation shaft. And it comes over outside and like just try to get Bucky out, which is just that's comic booky as fuck.
Yeah, I mean whatever. You gotta feed those beasts too, dude, when they're reading it. But I think overall, his run was like that whole era, dude. It just was such an era of like they called it the Architects.
Yeah,
that's what
the Marvel Architects.
The Marvel Architects, and they really cultivated their writers, and they gave them room to do new things, which we don't get to see a lot in comics. And I think that's why a Matt Fraction's Iron Man, which I'm rereading right now, which is fucking fantastic. And you know, I've read Cap by Brubaker multiple times. I've read Daredevil by Brubaker, Bendis's Daredevil. All that stuff is just. It's fantastic, and JMS's Thor, and Fraction took on Thor. We had that Fear Itself storyline, which also takes place when Cap is Bucky and Steve is back, and
Commander Rogers.
Yeah, Commander Rogers, which I think is that logo. But it's just such a fantastic era of comic books, and in my eyes, that's the best Cap run. I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade at like Kirby and Joe Simon or anything. 17 years from the day when 17 years later from when it was first created, Brubaker's Cap still holds up, and I think it will. It's one of those runs that can continue to hold up. I don't think that it will ever be dated. You know,
there's only a couple of. I mean, obviously the continuity is dated, but other than that, it's not.
Yeah.
There's everything else about it is very much modern, and I think it's nobody's been able to fill it. No one's been able to try, and that's something that Brubaker pointed out. I think in person, I heard him talk about this in person at a signing. That no one's really tried to emulate his style anymore. But he says it's more of a detriment. Like, why isn't anyone doing this anymore?
Yeah.
Like, why isn't somebody that has another voice within this kind of style doing this? Why has everything gone so differently, different direction? I think it's because nobody wants to try to,
You can't. How are you going to top that? How are you going to fucking top that run? I don't think you can. I think you can, like, take what he did and maybe put a spin on it, But I like Espionage Cap. I like Cap in this light where he's going undercover.
Secret Avengers, I thought was a good follow-up to that.
I do. It was a great run.
So for me, like what I don't understand, to me the natural direction for Bucky after Fear Itself would have been Uncanny X-Force Avengers. Just in the same idea. He leads a hit squad. Why wouldn't he? That makes perfect fucking sense.
Yeah. But I mean,
I don't know why they didn't do that.
I mean, they made a lot of missteps with the character. I mean, Winter Soldier is one of my favorite characters because of Brubaker. And I don't like what they do with him. And I think he's underutilized. And I even think, like, the way he's been written in a few series that he's been in, like the Strike Force.
Right now, there's the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's not bad, but he's got a cat.
Yeah, what?
And it's jokey. They're clearly gearing up for the show. Because the show is obviously going to have more of an MCU feel. Meaning that it's going to be funny. It's going to be a little bit more jokey and a little bit more lighthearted, like with Civil War, the movie, where they have that banter back and forth and they kind of like don't get along because they both want to be Steve's best friend.
Yeah.
Which it is kind of funny, but that's not really the way he was written originally.
Yeah, it's fine in the movie, whatever. Like, that's fine because he still has that stoic look to himself. But, like, in the comic books, when they have him jokey, I feel like he even has, like, a kind of like a jokey looking face to where he's a little bit... too warm. I don't know how else to describe it, but like his personality comes off like it's just too warm. Like he needs to be darker.
I don't mind it, like in that.
He's a fucking killer.
Yeah,
and
and
he's
Rosenberg
fucking sitting
did
there
that,
chatting about fucking cats and joking and like, get the fuck out of here,
What
dude.
is it called? Rosenberg, that small run, like 6 issues.
Tales of Astonish?
He tells of suspense.
Oh, Tales of Suspense. Okay.
He that I didn't mind because it was Hawkeye pointing out how much of a fucking like what blanket he is because he's always so fucking depressed and shit.
Yeah.
That's funny. So if you wanted to do that, I don't mind that.
Yeah.
Having this sharp contrast between Hawkeye being really funny and jokey and then Bucky just being like super serious.
Right.
That's fine, but now it's gotten to the point where now
Yeah.
Bucky's also gotten really jokey and funny and shit, and it's just
Yeah, and I think
doesn't really work.
and I think too about this entire run and I think it's a great place for people that watch the show to go back to this and check this out, and then also like people that aren't superhero fans, because there's a lot of people that read exclusively indie.
Yeah.
A lot of Brubaker fans. Like this is the book that you can kind of like segue into, and I like that because it does have somewhat of an indie feel for the most part until you have the crossover stuff. Like to where you don't need to know very much about the MCU. Or about the Marvel universe. I don't think you do.
I mean,
There's just certain storylines that you don't necessarily
Yeah.
need to know everything, and you can jump into that. You can
Right.
jump into that book and not know the vast majority of Marvel.
Right.
You can jump into the Iron Man by Matt Fraction
Yeah.
and not know the
That
majority
much
of
of it,
Marvel.
yeah.
Like I think that is another great thing about that era of Marvel is that it was super inclusive. Like you could jump into these new runs.
Because they were all trying to create new status quo and new tones for the characters. They all work kind of like Bendis's Daredevil.
Mhm.
Other than knowing a couple of things, it kind of set the new tone moving forward.
Right, but they did it without rebooting stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like they started over in
And
the universe.
Brubaker's Cap did the same thing. It established a new status quo and a new tone for Captain America. Same thing with Thor, JMS's Thor. That was considered like the new modern, like the Thor, like to the point where that design was considered the modern Thor.
Right.
And that is reestablished Thor for the new like 2000s era. And that's exactly why all these books really work.
Mhm.
Same with Hawkeye.
Yeah,
it
like
kind of a step. It kind of sometimes to his detriment because I think a lot of people just emulated that book now.
they tried to copy it, yeah.
When
for sure.
he wasn't always that jokey and that much of like just constantly falling apart.
Mhm.
But that also reestablished Hawkeye for like the post 2012.
Yeah.
And that's why all these books work so well for like, oh, I don't really know anything about Hawkeye. Well, read this. Same with Iron Fist.
Yeah.
Just read this. You don't need to know much about it. They'll tell you all in the book.
Brubaker and Fraction
Fraction.
together, dude. Like you don't see that.
Yeah, you know the story I told you right about Spider-Man, right?
No.
So Brubaker and Fraction wanted to do the same with AHA. They wanted to do the same exact thing with Spider-Man. They wanted to do Mortal Iron Fist. They wanted Mortal Iron Fist and like Spider-Man and Hawkeye to all be like. They wanted to be Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. And Dan Slott said no.
I hate Dan Slott.
He was the reason why and this is a conversation that Brubaker had a few years ago at a bookstore.
God damn you, Dan Slott.
Fraction, Brubaker, and AHA went to Marvel and said we want to do the same kind of thing with Spider-Man. And because Dan Slott was doing it in his own direction, it kind of didn't really work. And Slott didn't want to get off the book and wouldn't really give him the room. So Marvel said no. And that was one of the main reasons. That's one of the reasons why everybody kind of left toward the end, toward 2012-ish. 2012, 2013 was the last time we really saw Fraction, Brubaker, or any of these guys at Marvel anymore.
So Marvel chose Dan Slott
Yeah.
over Brubaker and Fraction. Well, you can count that among the many mistakes that Marvel's made over the past fucking few years.
Yeah,
That's
but,
crazy.
I mean,
I didn't
yeah.
know that. That's pretty crazy. Can't
Yeah,
imagine.
all these books are definitely worth checking out.
Yes.
Everything we've talked about.
Yes, and I know that they have some of the stuff collected in like the Ultimate collections,
Yes.
but they also are reprinting the omnibus of Cap, and I think that collects the first 25 issues, and I think it also has the Fallen Sun issue that we were talking about earlier as well, and I think that comes out in the next couple weeks. So make sure you hit up your local comic shop, pick it up. I guarantee you it will be one of the best books you read this year. If you haven't read it, if you've read it before, get this new edition again, dude, because it's definitely worth. I think it's only $100 for the fucking omnibus. It's not even that bad.
They do have smaller package ones too. They've reprinted a Winter Soldier labeled at the time with the movie.
Right.
They even have like the blue shield.
So that is the one you would want to start with. Is the Winter Soldier, and I think the Red Death is the collection after that because they don't even name it Volume 1, Volume 2.
Yeah, they just name it name.
Right. So Winter Soldier would be where you would start if you get it in that version. But make sure you check that out. It is one of the best Marvel comic books that has come out in the last. I would even go back 30 years. Back to the night. If you went from the 1990 to now, last 30 years, that's at in the top 3, in my opinion. And make sure you also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Comic Lounge. Throw your comments or suggestions down below. You can also email us, thecomicloungepod@gmail.com. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified every time we put up a new video. We also have an audio podcast on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, whatever you listen to a podcast on. It's available on there. And on that note, we're out.